Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something pretty dark, the history of murder, incorporated.
That's right. The enforcement arm, really, of the National Crime Syndicate back in the day.
Yeah, and we're looking at some material here that lays out their story. Our goal is basically to figure out, where they came from, how they
Oh,
operated.
the main players were.
Exactly, and, well, how it all fell apart in the end.
And it's fascinating because this wasn't just one ethnic group.
Yeah.
It was a mix.
Right. Italian Americans, Jewish Americans working together to carry out, potentially hundreds of contract killings across the country. It's pretty chilling stuff.
It really is. Let's get into it.
Okay, so origins. Where did this whole thing start?
Well, the material points squarely at New York City, and the active years are roughly 1929 to 1941.
So the Prohibition era bleeding into the Depression and pre-war years.
Exactly. And their territory wasn't just New York, it was the entire United States serving this bigger thing, the National Crime Syndicate.
Which included, like you said, the Mafia, the Jewish mob, other groups.
Yeah, it was a strategic alliance.
Yeah.
And Murder, Inc. was their muscle, initially led by Louis Lepke Buchalter.
Lepke, yeah, a big name. And later, Albert Anastasia took over, right? The Mad Hatter.
That's him. And the guys they pulled in, often from poor, working class areas, Jewish and Italian neighborhoods in Manhattan, Brooklyn,
Yeah.
places like that.
It makes you wonder about the paths that led them there, desperation, opportunity of a sort.
Probably a mix of things. And this whole idea wasn't entirely new. There was a predecessor group.
Ah, right, the Bugs and Meyer mob, Lansky and Siegel.
Exactly. Back in the early 20s, they were kind of the blueprint, maybe.
And then, like, Luciano comes along, creates the commission.
Right, and he specifically works with the Jewish mob, which is key to forming the National Crime Syndicate. It's like they realized cooperating, especially on enforcement, made everyone stronger.
Less infighting, more focus on, crime.
Pretty much. So the old Bugs and Meyer gang kind of dissolved, and those guys became part of this new specialized unit, Murder, Inc.
And where do they hang out? Sounds almost comical.
Yeah, Rosie Gold's candy store. In Brooklyn, corner of Saratoga and Livonia.
A candy store. Just hiding in plain sight.
It's the perfect cover, isn't it? People coming and going. No one looks twice. From there, they handled murder contracts from bosses all over the U.S.
Acting as the fist for Lepke Buchalter, basically.
That's a good way to put it. And some of these guys were incredibly prolific. The material mentions Harry Strauss.
Oh, yeah, Pittsburgh, Phil.
Yeah.
The numbers are insane. Over 100 killings, maybe up to 500.
It's staggering. Really underscores the sheer brutality and, frankly, the efficiency of this operation. He's kind of the poster child for the ruthlessness involved.
So that sets the stage. We know who they were, broadly speaking. But how did it work? The day-to-day operation of a murder-for-hire business?
Well, it wasn't just random violence. There was a structure. Remember, it came after the commission was formed.
So they answered to the Syndicate's board.
Essentially, yes. Orders usually came down from Lepke Buchalter, sometimes Joe Adonis. But the guy running the actual operations, the one putting the crews together for the hits.
That was Anastasia.
Albert Anastasia, yeah. The Mad Hatter, or as the material calls him, the Lord High Executioner.
That title. Oh.
Tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
he had help. Jacob Gura Shapiro was his main assistant.
And where did they find the actual triggermen, still pulling from the old gangs?
Partly, yeah, but they expanded. They recruited from Lepke's own group his labor sluggers.
What exactly is a lover slugger?
Basically, guys used for violence and intimidation in labor disputes, breaking strikes for companies, or sometimes roughing people up for unions trying to gain control. Lepke ran that racket with Tommy Luchese, Three-Fingered Brown.
Okay, so experienced muscle.
Right. And the other big source was a crew from Brownsville, Brooklyn, led by Martin Bugsy Goldstein and Abe Kid Twist. Reels, these guys were already deep in the life.
Reels. He becomes important later, doesn't he?
Very important. But yeah, these combined crews, they were busy. The estimates range from 400 up to maybe 1,000 contract killings.
1,000.
Yeah.
It's hard to even grasp that number, the sheer scale of death.
It really speaks to how powerful organized crime was at that time and how normalized extreme violence had become within that world.
What drove someone to join? Just the money.
Money was definitely part of it, yeah. They got paid per job, but there was also the pressure once you were in.
Hard to get out.
Extremely hard and dangerous. Silence was survival. Plus, the material mentions their families often got financial support too, so it's money, fear, maybe a twisted kind of loyalty.
A powerful cocktail.
Absolutely. And they were ruthless about protecting the organization. Look at Abe Wagner back in 32 informed on them.
He ran, but they found him.
Hunted him down and shot him. No loose ends. And think about Thomas Dewey's investigations in the 30s.
The famous prosecutor.
Right. Murder, Inc. was apparently kept very busy getting rid of potential witnesses anyone suspected of talking. Like George Rudnick in 37.
What happened to him?
Garroted. Stabbed with an ice pick, just because they thought he might be an informant.
Brutal.
Or Max Rubin, same year. Lepke told him to disappear. He didn't listen.
So they shot him.
Shot and wounded him, yeah. Just as a message. Disobeying orders wasn't tolerated.
And there were others, right? Morris Kessler, the Amberg brothers, all alleged victims around 35.
Yeah, the list is long, but probably the most famous victim.
Dutch Schultz.
Dutch Schultz. That case is really telling because it shows a crack in the Syndicate's unity.
How so?
Schultz was obsessed with killing Thomas Dewey. He kept demanding the commission approve the hit.
But Dewey was a high-profile prosecutor. Killing him would bring down massive heat, right?
Exactly what the commission thought. Too risky, bad for business. They told Schultz no, absolutely not.
But Schultz wasn't known for taking no for an answer.
He wasn't. He basically said, fine, I'll do it myself. And that sealed his fate.
So the commission, to avoid the Dewey fallout, decided to take out Schultz instead.
Precisely. A calculated move. Protect the larger enterprise. Charles Workman and Mendy Weiss got the assignment. They hit Schultz and his guys in Newark, 1935.
It shows a kind of cold logic, even within all that violence. Self-preservation above all.
That's the name of the game. Even for a guy as powerful as Schultz, defying the collective decision was suicide.
So Murder, Inc. operates like this, brutally efficient, for over 10 years. How did it finally unravel? What brought them down?
It really starts to come apart in 1941, and the key, ironically, was one of their own turning informants.
Kid Twist reels.
Kid reels, yeah. But the first signs of trouble were actually a bit earlier. There was testimony from a guy named Harry Rudolph about a murder back in 33.
Yeah.
That led to indictments for Relas, Martin Goldstein, and another guy, Anthony Maffitor.
And the Syndicate tried to shut that down.
Oh, yeah. Tried to bribe Rudolph to change his story. Clear Relas and Goldstein. Classic move.
But it didn't work.
Not entirely. Maffitor must have seen the writing on the wall. He decided to cooperate with the prosecutors.
He
flipped. And then he convinced another guy, Abraham Levine, to talk. And then the big one. Relas himself started cooperating.
The dominoes start falling.
Exactly. Once Relas started singing, it was like the floodgates opened. His testimony led to a wave of murder indictments across different cities.
And others followed his lead.
Yeah, Albert Tannenbaum, Seymour Magoon, Sholem Bernstein. Suddenly, the code of silence wasn't holding. The fear of prison, maybe the electric chair, became stronger than the fear of the mob.
Though Rudolph, the first guy, he died before he could testify.
He did, which was unfortunate for the prosecution. But by then, they had Relas and the others. Although Relas' own end is pretty suspicious.
Right. He died while under police protection. Fell out of a window.
Officially an accidental death.
Right.
November 1941. But he was on the 6th floor of the Half Moon Hotel in Coney Island, surrounded by police guards.
Doesn't sound very accidental.
Let's just say there are a lot of theories. He knew too much, had too many powerful enemies. His death was very convenient for some people.
Definitely cast a shadow. But his testimony, before he died, and the others, that led to the trials.
Oh, yes. Major trials. Harry Mowney, Frank Abendando, Harry Strauss, Martin Goldstein. The core members were finally facing judges and juries.
What were some of the key trials?
Well, Mowney and Abendando were tried for killing George Rudnick, the suspected informant. It was messy. They got convicted. Then the conviction got overturned on appeal. But they were retried, convicted again, and eventually executed.
What was the issue? The appeal?
They had an alibi, said they were at a grandmother's wake, but the prosecution brought in the undertaker and the embalmer.
And they said Mowney and Abendando weren't there.
Exactly. Blew the alibi right out of the water. That kind of detailed investigation was crucial.
Wow. What about Strauss and Goldstein?
They went on trial for killing a guy named Irving Feinstein. Again, Relas's testimony was central, also Seymour Magoon's. Strauss actually tried to fake insanity.
Didn't work.
Nope, didn't fool the court. They were convicted, appeals failed, executed.
And Charles Workman, the guy who shot Dutch Schultz.
His trial was interesting. Relas and others testified against him. He initially pleaded not guilty, but then changed his plea to no contest, got life in prison.
But he got out eventually.
Yeah, paroled decades later, a different outcome.
It wasn't always smooth sailing for the prosecution, though, was it?
No, definitely not. The case against Irving Mitzberg for killing Albert Schumann that went through multiple trials. Convictions kept getting overturned.
Why?
Issues with accomplice testimony. The law has rules about how much you can rely on the word of other criminals without corroboration. It shows the legal system, trying to follow the rules even with these guys.
But the biggest fish was still out there.
Lippy Buchalter, the boss. He finally went on trial with Emmanuel Weiss and Louis Capone.
Not Al Capone, a different Capone.
Right, Louis Capone. Shalom Bernstein's testimony was key here. They fought it hard all the way up.
To the Supreme Court.
Yep. But the convictions stuck. Buchalter, Weiss, and Capone were executed in 1944. That was really the final nail in the coffin for Murder, Inc. as an organization.
And Thomas Dewey, the prosecutor.
Yeah.
His career really took off after this, didn't it?
Absolutely. Taking down Lepke and Murder, Inc. made him a national figure, tough on crime, propelled him to become governor of New York.
It shows how fighting organized crime could really resonate with the public.
Definitely. And the material lists a whole bunch of other members and what happened to them. Some confessed, got prison time, Vito Guarino. Others faced trial, like Jacob Drucker and Irving Cohen for killing Walter Sage. Some got acquitted, like Jack Parisi.
So a mixed bag of results for the smaller players.
Yeah. Max Golub got a reduced sentence. Sidney Brown's indictment was dismissed. Duke Mafator and Pretty Levine got suspended sentences for cooperating. It wasn't a total wipeout, but the leadership and main hitters were gone.
And you have to give credit to the police work, too. The source mentions an NYPD Lieutenant John Osnato.
Right. Instrumental in getting guys like Ruthless and the others to cooperate. That behind-the-scenes work, building trust, making deals, that's vital in cases like this.
So the trials end. The key guys are executed or imprisoned. Murder, Inc. just disappears.
As that specific functioning unit, yes, the structure was broken. But the violence didn't just stop overnight. You mentioned Anthony Mafator, the guy who flipped first.
Yeah. What happened?
Presumed murdered years later, disappeared. And of course, Albert Anastasia.
It's a barbershop hit.
Very famous.
Infamous, yeah. Assassinated in 1957. So the world they lived in remained incredibly dangerous. Old scores, new rivalries. The violence continued, just maybe not under the Murder, Inc. banner.
It's amazing how this whole thing seeped into popular culture, too.
Oh, absolutely. The name itself is so evocative.
The material mentions it appearing on a WWII jacket.
Yeah, kind of a grim badge of honor, maybe. And then the movies. Murder, Inc. from 1960, The Enforcer, even hints in The Godfather.
Music, too. Springsteen. Bruce Springsteen's Murder Incorporated, yeah. And there was Murder, Inc. Records, the hip-hop label, a hip-hop group.
TV shows reference it all the time. The Simpsons, The Sopranos, obviously, even The West Wing.
It pops up everywhere. SWAT, Penny Dreadful, City of Angels. It's become shorthand for organized killing.
And books, of course. Like Murder, Inc., the story of the Syndicate. It's just part of the American crime landscape now.
It really is. Its notoriety far outlived its actual operational years. It represents this peak of industrialized killing within the mob structure.
So, wrapping this up, quite a journey. We've seen Murder, Inc.'s origins, this multi-ethnic force born from the National Crime Syndicate.
Their brutal methods, their structure, the sheer scale of their violence.
And then the downfall, driven by betrayal from within, and the relentless work of prosecutors like Dewey.
Culminating in those major trials and executions that finally broke the organization.
And its strange afterlife in popular culture.
Yeah. I think, the big takeaway is understanding how such a ruthless machine could operate almost like a shattered government service for so long.
Right. What allowed it to thrive? What does it tell us about power, crime, and justice back then?
And maybe even reflects on things today, the nature of loyalty, the allure of power, how society confronts organized violence. It leaves you thinking.
Definitely food for thought. We really encourage you, the listener, to look more into some of these figures and events. It's a dark but significant part of American history.
Absolutely.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.